Hello, darlings. Hello, welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. Make certain to hit the like and subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and you know what I have to do. I have to go right over here and share that I'm live with you. So hold on just a moment. Modern technology, I feel oftentimes that I am dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Turn that down. And now we're going to share this one. How do I do that? Let's see. You would think that I would remember every week, but I don't. Let's see. Library, your videos. Okay, it says I'm live, which is better than dead, I suppose. Top chat, live chat, no. Why can't I? Oh, here we go. Maybe this is it. Quality captions, loop, no. Playback speed, no. Why can I not find that? What am I doing wrong? Oh, because I was on the wrong site there for just a second. Let me copy that one, and then we'll go right over here to the Book of Faces, as I like to call it. We'll exit out of that. We will go into the Gentleman Psychic. We're going to create a post. Join me now for story time. We paste that one, and then we let it come up for just a second. Now, I don't know. I know we've got 3 viewers, but we have... oh, there you are. Lovely to see you too, Mitzi. Lovely to see you. So I'm going to share that one, published. Now I'm going to go down here to this one. Let's see. Right post. And we'll put this on to my news feed. Join me now for story time. And we share that one. Okay. Hello, Carlos. Good to see you. So we're just going to let a couple of people build up here. Welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. I am so excited to be here with you today. I am going to start painting again soon because it has been far too long. Look for that within the next couple of weeks. I'm certain those of you who follow me on the social media platforms will know that it has been a moment, but I will gladly share when it is time. And if you excuse me, this door being slightly cracked open annoys me. Hold on just a second. There we go. You can see my ring light is there behind me, not that I'm actually using it. And I don't like that there either. That's better. Okay, good. Yes, so I have plenty more paintings that I'll be doing, and usually they are up for sale, so we will see what happens when the time comes. Anyway, my darlings, we've got 7 people watching, and it is only 10:03 here on the East Coast. I do want to tell kind of a funny story. Those of you who saw me on Facebook will know this, and maybe on TikTok too. I am on, not TikTok too, but TikTok also. So the other day I was driving around in my lovely little roadster, Mr. Satan, and the license plate is Mr. Satan. This fella drives by me and he rolls down his window and he bellows, "I love Jesus." And I said, "I don't care." Can you imagine if every time I encountered someone with a Jesus fish, if I told them, "I love Satan," also myself. Anyway, hi, Mary Jane. Good to see you, lovely. Hi, Jess. Good to see you. So anyway, we'll go ahead and start now. We will go ahead and start. So uh, Prince Reminis has not been present very much lately because he has. Hello, Asim. Good to see you. Prince Reminis has not been available because he is allowing our hero, Geoffrey, to sort of have time with a certain lady friend. Well, at any rate, my loves, we shall continue. The Sorrows of Satan, Chapter 18. Looking back through the space of only 3 years to this particular period of my life, I could remember distinctly the singular expression of Lucio's face when I told him that Sybil Elton had accepted me. His sudden smile gave a light to his eyes that I had never seen in them before, a brilliant yet sinister glow, strangely suggestive of some inwardly suppressed wrath and scorn. While I spoke, he was, to my vexation, toying with that uncanny favorite of his, the mummy insect, and it annoyed me beyond measure to see the repulsive pertinacity with which the glittering bat-like creature clung to his hand. Women are all alike. Cody, hello. Women are all alike, he said with a hard laugh when he'd heard my news. Few of them have moral force enough to resist that temptation of a rich marriage. I was irritated at this. It is scarcely fair of you to judge everything by the money standard, I said. Then, after a little pause, I added that what in my own heart I knew to be a lie. She, Sybil, loves me for myself alone. His glance flashed over me like lightning. Oh, sets the wind in the quarter. Why then, my dear Geoffrey, I congratulate you more heartily than ever to conquer the affections of one of the proudest girls in England, and win her love so completely as to be sure she would marry you, and to be sure she would marry you, even if you had not, so to be blessed yourself with this a victory indeed, and one of which you may well be proud. Again and yet again, I congratulate you. Tossing the horrible thing he called his sprite off to fly on one of its slow humming circuits around the room, he shook my hand fervently, still smiling, and I, feeling instinctively that he was fully aware of the truth that I was, namely, that I had been a poor author with nothing but what I could earn but my brains. The Lady Sybil Elton would never have looked at me, much less agreed to marry me. Kept silence lest I should openly betray the reality of my position. You see, he went on, with a cheerful relentlessness, I was not aware that any old-world romance graced the disposition of one so apparently impassive as your beautiful disposition, of one so apparently impassive, your beautiful fiancé, beg your pardon. To love for love's sake only is becoming really an obsolete virtue. I thought Lady Sybil was an essentially modern woman, conscious of her position and the necessity there was for holding that position proudly before the world at all costs, and that the pretty pastoral sentiments of poetical Phyllises and Amandas had no place in her nature. I was wrong, it seems, and for once I have been mistaken in the fair sex. Here he stretched out his hand to the sprite that now came winging its way back and settled at once on its usual resting place. My friend, I assure you, if you have won the true woman's true love, you have far greater fortune than your millions, a treasure that none can afford to despise. His voice softened, his eyes grew dreamy, less scornful, and I looked at him in some astonishment. Why, Lucio, I thought you hated women. So I do, he replied quickly, but do not forget why I hate them. It is because they have all the world's possibilities of good in their hands, and the majority of them deliberately turn those possibilities to evil. Men are influenced entirely by women, though few of them will own it. Though women, they are lifted to heaven or driven to hell. The latter is the favorite course, and the one almost universally adopted. His brow darkened. The lines around his proud mouth grew hard and stern. I watched him for a moment. Then, with sudden irrelevancy, I said, "Put that abominable sprite of yours away, will you? I hate to see it with you." "What, my poor Egyptian princess?" he exclaimed with a laugh. "Why so cruel to her, Geoffrey? If you had lived in her day, you might have been one of her lovers. She was no doubt a charming person. I find her charming still. However, to oblige you," and here, placing the insect in its crystal receptacle, he carried it away to the other end of the room. Then, returning towards me, he slowly said, "Who knows what the sprite suffered as a woman, Geoffrey? Perhaps. She made a rich marriage and repented it. At any rate, I am sure she is much happier in her present condition." I have no sympathy with such ghastly fancy," I said abruptly. "I only know that she, or it, is a perfectly loathsome object to me." "Well, some transmigrated souls are loathsome objects to look at," he declared imperatively. "When they are deprived of their respectable two-legged fleshy coverings, it is extraordinary what a change the inexorable law of nature makes in them." "What nonsense you talk, Lucio," I said impatiently. "How can you know anything about it?" A sudden shadow passed over his face, giving it a strange pallor of impenetrability. "Have you forgotten your friend John Carrington? When he wrote that letter of introduction I bought from him to you, told you in it that in all matters scientific I was an absolute master. In these matters scientific you have not tested my skill, yet you ask, how can I know? I answer that I do know many things, things of which you are ignorant. Do not presume too much on your own intellectual capability, my friend, lest I prove it not, lest I demonstrate to you, beyond all possibility of consoling doubt, that shreds and strippings of the change you call death are only so many embryos of new life which you must live, whether you will or no." Somewhat abashed by his words, and still more by his manner, I said, "Pardon me, I spoke in haste, of course, but you know my theories." "Most thoroughly." And he laughed with an immediate resumption of his old manner. "Every man his own theory is fashionable motto of the hour. Each little bit tells you that he has his own idea of God, and equally his own idea of the devil. It's very droll. But let us return to the theme of love. I feel I have not congratulated you half enough, for surely fortune favors you singularly. Out of the teeming mass of vain and frivolous femininity, you have secured a unique example of beauty, truth, and purity. A woman who, apart from all self-interest and worldly advantage, weds you with 5 millions for you yourself alone. The prettiest poem in the world could be made out of such an exquisitely innocent maiden type. You are one of the luckiest men alive. In fact, you have nothing more to wish for." I did not contradict him, though. In my own mind, I felt that the circumstances of my engagement left much to be desired. I, who scoffed at religion, wished It had formed part of the character of my future wife. I, who sneered at sentiment, craved for some expression of it in the woman whose beauty attracted my desires. However, I determinedly smothered all of the premonitions of my own conscience and accepted what each day of the idle and useless life brought me without considering future consequences. The papers soon had the news that a marriage has been arranged and will shortly take place between Sybil, only daughter of the Earl of Elton, and Geoffrey Tempest, the famous millionaire. Not famous author, mark you, though I was still being loudly boomed. Morgeson, my publisher, could offer me no consultation as to my chances of winning and keeping a steady future of fame. The 10th edition of my book was announced, but we had not actually disposed of more than 2,000 copies, including one volume issue, which had been hastily thrust on the market, and the work I had so mercilessly and maliciously slated, Differences by Mavis Clare, was in its 13th thousand. I commented on this with some anger to Morganson, who was virtuously aggrieved at my complaint. Dear me, Mr. Tempest, you are not the only writer who has been boomed by the press, and who nevertheless does not sell, he exclaimed. No one can account for the caprices of the public. They are entirely beyond the most cautious publisher's control or calculation. Miss Clare is a sore subject to many authors besides yourself. She always takes, and no one can help it. I sympathize with you in the matter heartily, but I am not to blame. At any rate, the reviewers are all with you. Their praise has been almost unanimous. Now Mavis Clare's differences, though to my thinking a very brilliant and powerful book, has been literally cut to pieces whenever it has been noticed at all. And yet the public go for her and don't go for you. It isn't my fault, you see. People have got compulsory education now, and I'm afraid they begin to mistrust criticism, preferring to form their own independent opinions. If this is so, of course, it will be a terrible thing, because the most carefully organized because the most carefully organized clique in the world will be powerless. Everything has been done for you that can be done, Mr. Tempest. I am sure I regret as much as yourself that the result has not been all you expected nor desired. Many authors would not care so much for the public approval. The applause of cultured journalism such as you have obtained would be more than sufficient for them. I laughed bitterly. The applause of cultured journalism? I thought I knew something of the way in which such applause was won. Almost I began to hate my millions, golden trash that could only secure me the insincere flattery of fair-weather friends, and that could not give me fame, such fame as has sometimes been grasped in the moment by starving and neglected genius, who in the very arms of death succeeds in mastering the world. One day, in a fit of disappointment and petulance, I said to Lucio, "You have not kept all of your promises, my friend. You told me you could give me fame." He looked at me curiously. "Did I? Well, and are you not famous?" "No, I am merely notorious," I retorted. He smiled. "The word fame, my good Geoffrey, traced to its origin, means breath, the breath of popular adulation. You have that for your wealth, but not for my work. You have the praise of the reviewers. What's it worth?" "Everything," he answered, smiling, "in the reviewer's own opinion." I was silent. "You speak of word," he went on. "Now the nature of work I cannot... Oh, you speak of work," he went on. "Now the nature of work I cannot exactly express, because it is a divine thing, and is judged by a divine standard. One must consider in all work two things. First, the object for which it is undertaken, and, secondly, the way in which it is performed. All work should have high and unselfish intent. Without this, it perishes and is not considered work at all. not at least by the eternal judges invisible. If it is work truly and nobly done in every sense of the word, it carries with it its own reward, and the laurels descend from heaven, shaped ready for wearing. No earthly power can bestow them. I cannot give you that fame, but I have secured you a very fair imitation of it. I was obliged to acquiesce, though more or less morosely, whereat I saw that he was somewhat amused. Unwilling to incur his contempt, I said no more concerning the subject that was the sorest to my heart, and wore out my sleepless hours at night in trying to write a new book. Something novel and daring, such as should force the public to credit me with a little loftier status than that obtained by the possession of a huge banking account. But the creative faculty seemed dead in me. I was crushed by a sense of impotence and failure. Vague ideas were in my brain that would not lend themselves to expression in words, and such a diseased love of hypercriticism controlled me that after miserably nervous an analysis of every page I wrote, I tore it up as soon as it was written, thus reducing myself to a state of mind that was almost unbearable. Early in April, I made my first visit to Ellismere, having received information from the head of the firm of the decorators and the furnishers employed there that their work was close on completion, and that they would be glad to visit the inspection from me. Lucio and I went down together for the day, and as the train rushed through a green and smiling landscape, bearing us away from the smoke, dirt, and noise of the restless modern Babylon, I was conscious of gradually deepening peace and pleasure. The first sight of the place I had recklessly purchased without so much as looking at it filled me with delight and admiration. It was a beautiful old house, ideally English and suggestive of the home of happiness. Ivy and jasmine clung to its red walls with picturesque gables. Through the long vista of exquisitely wooded grounds, the silver gleam of the Avon River could be discerned, twisting in and out like a ribbon tied in true love knots. The trees and shrubs were sprouting forth in all their fresh spring beauty. The aspect of the country was indescribably bright and soothing, and I began to feel as if a burden had been suddenly lifted from my life, leaving me free to breathe and enjoy my liberty. I strolled from room to room of my future abode, admiring at the taste and skill with which the whole place had been fitted and furnished. Down to the smallest detail of elegance, comfort, and convenience, here my Sibyl was born, I thought, with a lover-like tenderness. Here she would dwell again as my wife amid the lovely and beloved surroundings of her childhood, and we would be happy. We should be happy. Yes, we should be happy despite all the dull and heartless social doctrines of the modern world. In the spacious and beautiful drawing room, I stopped to look out from the windows on the entrancing view of the lawn and woodland that stretched before me. And as I looked, a warm sense of gratitude and affection filled me for the friend to whose good offices I owed this fair domain. Turning, I grasped him by the hand. "It is all your doing, Lucio," I said. "I feel I can never thank you enough. Without you, I should perhaps never have met Sibyl. I might never have heard of her, or Willowsmere, and I never could have been as happy as I am today." "Oh, you are happy, then?" he queried with a little smile. "I fancied you were not." "Well, I've not been as happy as I expected to be," I confessed. "Something in my sudden ascension to wealth seems to have dragged me down rather than lifted me up. It is strange." "Oh, it's not strange at all," he interrupted. "On the contrary, it is very natural. As a rule, the most miserable people in the world are rich. Are you miserable, for instance?" I asked, smiling. His eyes rested on me with dark and dreary pathos. "Are you too blind to see that I am?" he answered, his assent vibrating with intense melancholy. Can you think I am happy? Does the smile I wear, the disguising smile men put on a mask to hide their secret agonies from the pitiless gaze of unsympathetic fellow creatures, persuade you that I am free from care? As for my wealth, I have never told you the extent of it. If I did, it might indeed amaze you, though I believe it would not now arouse your envy, considering that your trifling 5 millions have not been without effect in depressing your soul. But I could buy up kingdoms and be none the poorer. I could throne and unthrone kings and be none the wiser. I could crush whole countries under the iron heel of financial speculation. I could possess the world, and yet estimate it at no higher value than I do now, the value of a grain of dust circling through infinity, or a soap bubble blown on the wind. His brows knitted, his face expressed pride, scorn, and sorrow. There is some mystery about you, Lucio, I said, some grief or loss that your wealth cannot repair, and that makes you the strange being you are. One day perhaps you will confide in me. He laughed loudly, almost fiercely, and clapped me heavily on the shoulder. I will, he said. I will tell you my history. And you, excellent agnostic as you are, shall minister to mind diseased and pluck out the memory of the rooted sorrow. What a power of expression there was in Shakespeare, the uncrowned but actual king of England. Not the rooted sorrow alone was to be plucked out, but the very memory of it. The apparently simple line holds complex wisdom. No doubt the poet knew or instinctively guessed the most terrible fact in all the universe. And what was that? The eternal consciousness of memory, he replied. God cannot forget, and in consequence of this, his creatures may not. I forbore to reply, but I suppose my face betrayed my thoughts, for the cynical smile I knew so well played round his mouth as he looked at me. I go beyond your patience, do I not, he said, laughing again, when I mention God, who is declared by certain scientists as to be non-existent, except as blind, indifferent, natural force of atom producer. You are bored. I can see that at a glance. Pray forgive me. Let us resume our tour of inspection through this charming abode. You'll be very difficult to satisfy if you are not a very emperor of contentment here. With a beautiful wife and plenty of cash, you can well afford to give fame the go-by. I may win it yet, I said hopefully. In this place I feel I could write something worthy of being written. Good. The divine flutterings of winged thoughts are in your brain. Apollo, grant them strength to fly. And now let us have luncheon. Afterwards we shall have time to take a stroll. In the dining room I found an elegant repast prepared, which rather surprised me, as I had given no orders, having indeed forgotten to do so. Lucio, however, had it appeared not forgotten. An advance telegram from him had placed certain caterers at Leamington on their mettle, with the result that we sat down to a feast as delicate and luxurious as any two epicures could desire. Now, I want you to do me a favor, Geoffrey, said Lucio during our luncheon. You will scarcely need to reside here till after your marriage. You may have too many engagements in town. You spoke of entertaining a big house party down here. I wouldn't do that if I were you. It isn't worth while. You would have to get in staff of servants and leave them all afterwards to their own devices while you are on your honeymoon. That is what I propose. Give a grand fete here in honor of your betrothal to Lady Sybil in May, and let me be the master of the revels. I was in the mood to agree to anything. Moreover, the idea seemed an excellent one. I said so, and Jimenez went on quickly. You understand, of course, that if I undertake to do a thing, I always do it thoroughly and book no interference with my plans. Now, as your marriage will be the signal for our partying, at any rate for a time, I should like to show you my appreciation of your friendship by organizing a brilliant affair of the kind I suggest. And if you will leave it all to me, I guarantee you shall hold with a feat that has never been seen or known in England, and it will be personal satisfaction to me if you consent to my proposal. My dear fellow, I answered, of course I consent willingly. I give you carte blanche to do as you like. Do as you like. It is most friendly and kind of you, but when are we to make this sensation? You are to be married in June, he asked. Yes, in the second week of the month. Very well. The fete shall be held on the 22nd of May. That will give society time to recover from the effect of one burst of splendor in order to be ready for another, namely the wedding. Now, we need not talk of this any more. It is settled. The rest devolves on me. We've got 3 or 4 hours to spare before we take the train back to town. Suppose we take a saunter through the grounds. I assented to this, and accompanied him readily, feeling in high spirits and good humour. Ellismere and its peaceful loveliness seemed to cleanse my brain of all the corroding influences. The blessed silence of the wood and hills after the rush and roar of town life soothed and cheered me, and I walked beside my companion with a light heart and smiling face, happy and filled with dim religious faith in the blue sky, if not the God beyond it. We sauntered through the fair gardens, which were now mine, and then out through the park into a lovely little lane, a true Warwickshire lane, where the celandines were strewing the grass with their bright gold coinage, and the star-wort thrust up fairy bouquets of white bloom between buttercups and clover, and where the hawthorn buds were beginning to show themselves like minute snow pellets among the glossy young green. A thrush warbled melodiously. A lark rose from almost our very feet and flung itself joyously into the sky with wild outburst of song. A robin hopped through a little hole in the hedge to look at us in the blithe inquisitiveness as we passed. All at once, Lucio stopped and laid his hand on my shoulder. His eyes had a beautiful melancholy of far-off longing, which I could neither understand nor define. Listen, Geoffrey, he said, listen to the silence of the earth while the lark sings. Have you ever observed the receptive attitude in such nature seems to wait for sounds divine? I did not answer. The silence around us was indeed impressive. The warbling of the thrush had ceased, and only the lark's clear voice pealing overhead echoed sweetly through the stillness of the lane. In the clerical heaven, went on Lucio dreamily, there are no birds. There are only conceited human souls braying forth Alleluia. No flowers are included, no trees, only golden streets. What a poor and barbarous conception! As if a world inhabited by a deity would not contain the wonders, graces, and beauties of all worlds. Even this little planet is more naturally beautiful than the clerical heaven. That is, it is beautiful wherever man is not. I protest, I have always protested against the creation of man. I laughed. You protest against your own existence, then, I said. His eyes darkened slowly to a somber, brooding blackness. When the sea roars and flings itself in anger on the shore, it craves its prey, mankind. It seeks to wash the fair earth clean of the puny insect that troubles the planet's peace. It drowns the noxious creature when it can, with the aid of its sympathizing comrade, the wind. When the thunder crashes down a second after the lightning does, it does it not seem to you that the very clouds combine in the holy war? The war against God's one mistake, the making of humanity, the effort to sweep it out of the universe as one erases a weak expression in an otherwise perfect poem. You and I, for example, are the only discords in today's woodland's harmony. We are not particularly grateful for life. We certainly are not content with it. We have not the innocence of the bird or the flower. We have more knowledge, you will say, but how can we be sure of that? Our wisdom came from the devil in the first place, according to the legend of the tree of knowledge, the fruit of which taught both good and evil, but which still apparently persuades man to evil rather than good, and leads him on to a considerable amount of arrogance besides. For he has an idea he will be immortal as a god in the hereafter. Ye majestic heavens, what an inadequately stupendous fate, your gain of worthless dust, a dwarfish atom such as he. Well, I have no ideas of immortality, I said. I have told you that often. This life is enough for me. I want and expect no other. Aye, but if there were another, answered Lucio, fixing me with a steady look. And if you were not asked your opinion about it, but simply plunged headlong into a state of terrible consciousness of which you would rather not be. Oh, come on now, I said impatiently. Do not let us theorize. I am happy today. My heart is as light as that of the bird singing in the sky. I am in the very best of humors, and could not say an unkind word to my worst enemy. He smiled. Is that your humor? And he took me by the arm. Then there could be no better opportunity for showing you this pretty little corner of the world. And walking on a few yards, he dexterously turned me down the narrow path leading from the lane, and brought me face to face with a lovely old cottage almost buried in the green of the young spring verdure, and surrounded by an open fence overgrown with hawthorn and sweet-briar. Keep firm, hold over your temper, Geoffrey, and maintain the benignant tranquillity of your mind. Here dwells the woman whose name and fame you hate, Mavis Clare. Let's see. Oh, we've got time. Chapter 19. The blood rushed to my face, and I stopped abruptly. Let us go back, I said. Why? Because I do not know Miss Clare, and I do not want to know her. Literary women are my abhorrence. They are always more or less unsexed. You are thinking of the new women, I suppose, but you flatter them. They never had any sex to lose. The self-degrading creatures who delineate their fictional heroines as wallowing in unchastity, and who write freely on the subjects which men would hesitate to name, are unnatural hybrids of no sex. Mavis Clare is not one of them. She's an old-fashioned young woman. Mademoiselle de Reno, the dancer, is unsexed, but you did not object to her on that score. On the contrary, I believe you have shown your appreciation of her talents by spending a considerable amount of cash upon her. That is not a fair comparison, I answered hotly. Mademoiselle de Reno amused me for a time. And was not your rival in art, said Lucio, with a little malicious smile. I see. Still, as far as the question of being unsexed goes, I personally consider that a woman who knows the power of her intellect is more to be respected than a woman who shows the power of her legs. But men always prefer legs, just as they prefer the devil to the deity. All the same, I think as we have time to spare, we may as well see this genius. Genius? I echoed contemptuously. Feminine twaddler, then, he suggested, laughing. Let us see this feminine twaddler. She will no doubt prove as amusing as Mademoiselle de Reno, in her own way. I shall ring the bell and ask if she is home. He advanced towards the creeper-covered porch, but I stood back, mortified and sullen, determined not to accompany him inside the house if he were admitted. Suddenly a blithe peal of magical laughter sounded through the air, and a clear voice exclaimed, "Oh, Trixie, you wicked boy! Take it back directly and apologize." Lucio peered through the fence and then beckoned to me energetically. "There she is," he whispered. "There's the Dyspeptic, sour, savage, old blue stocking, there on the lawn, by heaven. She's enough to strike terror into the heart of any man and millionaire. I looked where he pointed, and saw nothing but a fair-haired girl in a white gown, sitting in a low basket chair with a tiny toy terrier on her lap. The terrier was jealously guarding a large, square dog biscuit, nearly as big as himself, and at a little distance off sat a magnificent rough-coated St. Bernard, wagging his feathery tail to and fro, with every sign of good humour and enjoyment. The position was evident at a glance. The small dog had taken his huge companion's biscuit from him and had conveyed to his mistress a canine joke which seemed to be appreciated and understood by all the parties concerned. But as I watched the little group, I did not believe that the woman I saw was Mavis Clare. That small head was surely never made for wearing of deathless laurels, but rather for a garland of roses, sweet and perishable, twined by a lover's hand. No, such slight feminine creature as the one I now looked upon could never be capable of the intellectual grasp and power of differences, the book I secretly admired and wondered at, but which I had anonymously striven to squash in its successful career. The writer of such work, I imagine, must needs be a more or less strong physique with pronounced features and an impressive personality. This butterfly thing, playing with a dog, was no type of blue stocking, and I said as much to Lucio. That cannot be Miss Clare, I said. More likely a visitor, or perhaps the companion secretary. The novelist must be very different in appearance to that frivolous young person in white, whose dress is distinctly Parisian, and who seems to have nothing whatsoever to do but to amuse herself. Trixie, said her clear voice again, take back the biscuit and apologize. The tiny terrier looked around with an incoherently abstract air, as if the earnestness of its own thoughts he had not quite caught the meaning of the sentence. Trixie, the voice became more imperative, take it back and apologize. With a comical expression of resignation to the circumstances, Trixie seized the large biscuit and, holding it in his teeth with gingerly care, jumped from his mistress's knee and trotted briskly up to the St. Bernard, who was still wagging his tail and smiling as visibly as dogs often can smile, restored his stolen goods with 3 short yapping barks, as much as to say, there, take it. The St. Bernard rose in all his majestic bulk and sniffed at it, then sniffed his small friend, apparently in dignified doubt as to which the terrier and which was the biscuit. Then, lying down again, he gave himself up to the pleasure of munching his meal for a while. Trixie, with wild barks of delight, performed a sort of mad war dance around him by a way of entertainment. This piece of dog comedy was still going on when Lucio turned away from his point of observation at the fence, and going up to the gate, rang the bell. A neat maidservant answered the summons. Is Miss Clare at home? He asked. Yes, sir, but I am not sure whether she will receive you, the maid replied, unless you have an appointment. We have no appointment, said Lucio, but if you will take these cards. Here, he turned to me. Geoffrey, give me one of yours. I complied somewhat reluctantly. If you will take these cards, he resumed, to Miss Clare, it is just possible she may be kind enough to see us. If not, it will be our loss. He spoke so gently, and with such an ingratiating manner, that I could see the servant was at once proposed in his favour. Step in, sir, if you please, she said, smiling, and opening the gate. He obeyed with alacrity, and I, who a moment ago had resolved not to enter the place, found myself passively following him under the archway of sprouting young leaves and early budding jasmine, into Lily Cottage, which was to prove one day, though I knew it not then, the only haven of peace and security I should ever crave for, and craving, be unable to win. The house was much larger than it looked from the outside. The entrance hall was square and lofty and panelled with fine old carved oak, and the drawing-room into which we were shown was one of the most picturesque and beautiful apartments I had ever seen. There were flowers everywhere, books, rare bits of china, elegant trifles that only a woman of perfect taste would have the sense to select and appreciate. On one or two of the side tables and on the grand piano were autographed portraits of many of the greatest celebrities in Europe. Lucio strolled about the room, making soft comments. "Here is an autocrat of all of the Russias," he said, pausing before a fine portrait of the Tsar. "Signed by the imperial hand, too. Now, what has the feminine twaddler done to deserve that honor, I wonder? Here, in strange contrast, is the wild-haired Paderewski, and beside him the perennial Patty. There is Her Majesty of Italy, and here we have HRH, the Prince of Wales, all autographed likenesses. Upon my word, Miss Clare seems to attract a great many nobilities around her without the aid of hard cash. I wonder how she does it, Geoffrey," and his eyes sparkled half maliciously. "Can it be a case of genius after all? Look at those lilies," and he pointed to a mass of white bloom in one of the windows. "Are they not far more beautiful creatures than men and women, dumb yet eloquent of purity? No wonder the painters chose them as only flowers suitable for the adornment of angels." As he spoke, the door opened, and the girl we had seen on the lawn entered, carrying her toy terrier in one arm. Was she Mavis Clare, or perhaps someone sent to say that the novelist could not receive us? I wondered silently, looking at her in surprise and something of confusion. Lucio advanced with an odd mingling of humility and appeal in his manner which was new to me. "We must apologize for our intrusion, Miss Clare," he said, "but happening to pass your house, we could not resist making an attempt to see you. My name is Jimenez." He hesitated oddly for a second, then went on. "And this is my friend Geoffrey Tempest, the author." The girl raised her eyes to mine with a little smile and courteous bend of her head. "He has, as I dare say, you know, become the owner of Ellismere Court. You will be neighbours, and I hope friends. In any case, if we have committed a breach of etiquette in venturing to call upon without previous introduction, you must try and forgive us. It is difficult to me impossible to pass the dwelling of a celebrity without offering homage to the presiding genius therein." Miss Clare, for it was Mavis Clare, seemed not to have heard the intended compliment. "You are very welcome," she said, simply advancing with a pretty grace and extending her hand to each in turn. "I am quite accustomed to visits from strangers, but I already know Mr. Tempest very well by reputation. Won't you sit down?" She motioned us to two chairs in the lily-decked window corner and rang the bell. Her maid appeared. "Tea, Janet?" This order given, she seated herself near us, still holding her little dog, curled up against her like a small ball of silk. I tried to converse, but could find nothing suitable to say. The sight of her filled me with too great a sense of self-reproach and shame. She was such a quiet, graceful creature, so slight and dainty, so perfectly unaffected and simple in manner that I thought of the slaughtering article I had written against her work. I felt like a low brute who had been stoning a child, and yet, after all, it was her genius I hated, the force and passion of that mystic quality which, wherever it appears, compels the world's attention. This was the gift she had that I lacked and coveted. Moved by the most conflicting sensation, I gazed abstractedly out on the shady old garden. I heard Lucio conversing on the trifling matters of society and literature generally, and every now and then her bright laugh rang out like a little peal of bells. Soon I felt rather than I saw that she was looking steadily at me, and turning I met her eyes, deep, dense blue eyes, candidly grave and clear. "Is this your first visit to Ellismere Court?" she asked. "Yes," I answered, making an effort to appear more at my ease. "I bought the place, on the recommendation of my friend the prince here, without looking at it." "So I heard," she said, still observing me curiously. "And you are satisfied with it?" Oh, more than satisfied. I am delighted. It exceeds all of my best expectations. Mr. Tempest is going to marry the daughter of the former owner of Ellismere, put in Lucio. No doubt you have seen it announced in the papers. Yes, she responded with a slight smile. I have seen it, and I think Mr. Tempest is much to be congratulated. Lady Sybil is very lovely. Hmm. I remember her as a beautiful child when I was a child myself. I never spoke to her, but I often saw her. She must be charmed at the prospect of returning as the bride to the old home she loved so well. Here, the servant entered with tea. Miss Clare, putting down her tiny dog, went to the table to dispense it. I watched her move across the room with a sense of vague wonder and reluctant admiration. She rather resembled a picture by Greuze, in her soft white gown with a pale rose nestled amid the old Flemish lace at her throat. And as she turned her head towards us, the sunlight caught her hair and turned it into the similitude of golden halo circling her brows. She was not a beauty, but she possessed an undoubted individual charm, a delicate attractiveness which silently asserted itself as the breath of honeysuckle, hidden in the tangles of a hedge, will delight the wayfarer with sweet fragrance, though the flowers be unseen. Your book was very clever, Mr. Tempest, she said, suddenly smiling at me. I read it as soon as it came out, but do you know, I think your article is even cleverer? I felt myself growing uncomfortably red in the face. To what article do you allude, Miss Clare? I stammered confusedly. I do not write for any magazine. No? And she laughed gaily. But you did on this occasion. You slated me very smartly. I quite enjoyed it. I found out that you were the author of the Philippic, not through the editor of the journal. Oh, no, poor man. He's very discreet, but through quite another person who must be nameless. It's very difficult to prevent me from finding out whatever I wish to know, especially in literary matters. Why, you look quite unhappy. And her blue eyes danced with fun as she handed me a cup of tea. You really don't suppose I was hurt by your critique, do you? Oh, dear me, no, nothing of the kind ever affronts me. I am far too busy to waste any thoughts on reviews or reviewers. Only your article was exceptionally funny. Funny? Yes, funny, she repeated. It was so very angry that it became amusing. My poor differences. I am really sorry to put you into such temper. Temper does exhaust one's energy so. She laughed again and sat down in her former place near me, regarding with a frankly open and half-humorous gaze which I found I could not meet with any sort of composure. To say I felt foolish would inadequately express my sense of utter bafflement. This woman, with her young, unclouded face, sweet voice, and evidently happy nature, was not at all the creature I had imagined her to be, and I struggled to say something, anything, that would furnish a reasonable and coherent answer. I caught Lucio's glance of one of the satirical amusement, and my thoughts grew more entangled than ever. A distraction, however, occurred in the behavior of the dog, Trixie, who suddenly took up a position immediately opposite Lucio, and lifting his nose in the air, began to howl with a desolate loudness astonishing in so small an animal. His mistress was surprised. Trixie, what is the matter? She exclaimed, catching him up in her arms. He hid his face, shivering and moaning. Then she looked steady at Lucio. I never knew him to do such a thing before, she said. Perhaps you do not like dogs, Prince Ximenes? I'm afraid they do not like me, he replied deferentially. Then pray excuse me for a moment, she murmured, and left the room to return immediately without her canine favorite. After this, I noticed that her blue eyes often rested on Lucio's handsome countenance with a bewildered and perplexed expression, as if she saw something in his very beauty that she disliked or distrusted. Meanwhile, I had recovered a little of my usual self-possession, and I addressed her in a tone which I meant to be kind, but which I knew was somewhat patronizing. I'm very glad, Miss Clare, that you are not offended at the article you speak of. It was rather strong, I admit, but you know we cannot all be of the same opinion. Indeed, no, she said quietly, and with a slight smile. Such a state of things would make a very dull world. I assure you, I was not, and am not, the least bit offended. The critique was a smart piece of writing, and made not the slightest effect on me or my book. You remember what Shelley wrote of critics? No. You'll find the passage in his preface to The Revolt of Islam, and it runs thus. I have sought to write as I believe that Homer, Shakespeare, and Milton wrote, with an utter disregard of anonymous censure. I am certain that calumny and misrepresentation, though it may move me to compassion, cannot disturb my peace. I shall understand the expressive silence of those sagacious enemies who dare not trust themselves to speak. I shall endeavour to extract from the midst of insult and contempt the maledictions, those abominations which may tend to correct whatever imperfections such censures may discern in my appeal to the public. If certain critics were as clear-sighted as they are malignant, how great would the benefit be derived from their virulent writings? As it is, I fear I shall be malicious enough to be amused with their paltry tricks and lame invectiveness. Should the public judge that my composition is worthless, I shall indeed bow before my tribunal from which Milton received his crown of immortality, and shall seek to gather, if I live, strength from the defeat which may nerve me to some new enterprise of thought which may not be worthless. As she gave me the quotation, her eyes darkened and deepened, her face was lighted up as by some inward illumination, and I discovered the rich sweetness of the voice which made the name Mavis suit her so well. You see, I know Shelley, she said with a little laugh at her own emotion, and those words are particularly familiar to me because I have had them painted upon my panel in my study, just to remind me in case I should forget what the really great geniuses of the world thought of criticism, because that example is very encouraging and helpful to a humble little worker like myself. I am not a press favorite, and I never get good reviews, but, and she laughed again, I like my reviewers all the same. If you have finished your tea, will you come and see them? Come and see them? What did she mean? She seemed delighted at my visible surprise, and her cheeks dimpled with merriment. Come and see them, she repeated. They generally expect me at this hour. She led the way into the garden. We followed, I, in bewildered confusion of mind, with all of my ideas respecting unsexed females and repulsive blue stockings upset by the unaffected behavior and charming frankness of this celebrity, whose fame I envied, and whose personality I could not but admire. With all her intellectual gifts, she was yet lovable woman. Oh, Mavis, how lovable and dear! I was destined in misery to know. Mavis, Mavis, I whisper your sweet name. In my solitude I see you in my dreams, and kneeling before you I call you angel, my angel, at the gate of the lost paradise, whose sword of genius, turning every way, keeps me back from all approach to my fortified tree of life. That is where we end for the evening. Boy, it sounds rather intriguing, doesn't it? That Mavis Clare might have an admirer after all. Anyway, my lovelies, thank you everyone for joining. I see my friend Lauren, he was very kind and removed someone from the chats. If you can, give Lauren Morgan Richards a follow. You can find me over there too for his book, The Goodbye Family. I am truly honored. My friend Lauren is quite a clever author. Anyway, my lovelies, I did see someone had posted what they thought was my address. Well, surprise, I don't live in Pasadena. So that's lovely. I hope you enjoyed that. If you are enjoying my channel, Make certain to hit the like and subscribe button. Also, a great way of supporting this channel is to become a patron member. I've been a little lax over there. Admittedly, I have been going through chaos, but things are starting to settle. At any rate, my beauties, I just adore you. I so am grateful that you joined me today. Also, if you would like to book an appointment with me, you can find me at thegentlemanpsychic.com. I do video readings. I also do some in-person ones. Anyway, my lovelies, thank you for all of the kind comments, and also thank you to the negative ones. I appreciate you. Till next time, have a good night.